Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young. I'm just going to walk you through real estate trends for North America. So it's a look at March 2006 data, and I'm going to frame it in terms of what's going on in the exact sector and what could be expected as part of different programs and how different factors are driving the economy. Now, this is one perspective of real estate. You're more than apt to go out to the real estate boards, either provincial, state, or at the federal level, to see what's going on in terms of programs to get a different perspective. Mine's just going to give you a general statement of what's going on. This is a little bit about myself. I'm a CPA CGA by trade. I basically present information, but I also present strategy or solutions around what's going on with the information and how to interpret it and how it may impact you as you go forward. So I'll talk about housing starts, Canada and the US. I'll talk about retail sales because I'll show you how they're triggering what's happening in the residential area. I'll talk about HQ relocations because businesses make decisions where they're going to basically relocate their headquarters. I'll talk about clean energy, and I'll talk a little bit more about the implications. Now, if you look at this trend here, you're showing basically housing starts in Canada and housing starts in the US. They're relatively healthy, but if you peel back the banana and get to the peel to get to the banana, you'll actually see that US housing starts have been rising since the meltdown in 2008-2009, but they still are well below historical levels, about 15 to 25% below historical levels. So there is certain amount of expectations that maybe the housing market isn't really rebounding to pre-1990 type of eras where we saw a big boom in the housing market. So it's something to bear in mind. But it is growing in both Canada and the US. This just kind of shows you what's happening in housing costs, where it bottomed out and how it's been growing up in terms of things and pricing. So in general, home equity is starting to basically come back, where it's lost a lot in 2008-2009 due to the real estate bubble. You're starting to see a rebound there. And home equity is a key driver when you're starting to look at income and looking at markets and everything else in terms of valuations. Now, resale market in Canada has been relatively strong. There's certain factors in play here. Whenever you have low interest rates, you see pressure on housing prices, and it's something to bear in mind as you move forward. And it's whether or not this is stable over a long haul. At some point we may see a market correction. It's something to bear in mind. I brought in retail sales because it shows you the trends that people are actually spending money in home furnishings as well as renovations of homes, and that's something to bear in mind in terms of the growth. Same with the US. There's a big focus on spending money on the house. That's what you're seeing here as well. Relocation just gives you an idea that this eats up commercial and industrial space. So this shows you that depending on their cost to serve model within those cities, companies are looking at relocation, and Milwaukee seems to be winning out on some of the home relocations. I brought in clean energies because there's different programs in play. Solar windows is the latest one, which is basically window sheets over windows that absorb some of the indirect or direct photons from the sunlight, so basically that can be stored in terms of the batteries. I've also put in some solar trends around what's happening in the residential area, because there's a lot of activity both in Canada and the US in terms of retrofitting houses that needs to be bear in mind. And I brought in microgrid too. That's something an area you may want to look at in terms of how they're kind of managing the grid, because microgrid seems to be a growing area in technology. Now basically, the issues facing real estate, especially in Canada and the US, is the softwood lumber agreements coming up for renewal, and that's going to impact the cost of lumber. And it's also going to impact in terms of what's happening in the lobbying by the US forestry companies, and that's something to bear in mind. We have a slow economy, both Canada and the US, as well as globally, that needs to be watched, because slow economies, less people might conserve cash in terms of how they'll spend, but there's no indication so far when you look at the retail sales trends that's the case. Slow wage growth, we're still not seeing significant improvements in wage growth, so companies are trying to cap their costs, and it's something to bear in mind. And it also comes into play too as well with government and public sector workers, as there's wage freezes or other compensation issues in play there. In Canada's case, they changed some of the down payment rules for mortgages above $500 to $1 million, so that's in play. And you're also seeing situations too in the US where Generation Y is starting to enter the marketplace now, because they're starting to get that new job and they're looking at getting into the housing market. Now, that being said, there's a bunch of things that you should watch out for in terms of the trends. You should be looking at the commercial trends to see what's going on in terms of available office space. You should also be looking at the retail sales trends because it shows you how much people are spending, because that eats in terms of the income, and it shows you in terms of a healthy economy. Nearshoring is another area because this comes into play in terms of looking at adding industrial capacity, bringing those manufacturing jobs back to North America, and that should be evaluated too as well. Now, the idea with this presentation is to give you a quick look at that the housing market in general, or in general, the real estate market in Canada, in North America, is pretty good. And that's a good indication of the economy. When you're looking at factors of the economy, you look at exports, you look at real estate, and you look at consumer spending, because they kind of tell you the health of an economy. And so far, what we're seeing indications there, the economy is pretty healthy. But there will be pressure points coming in. If any sort of new government policy comes in, whether that's a carbon tax, whether that's changes in the hydro rates, or changes in mortgage rules, will have an impact on how these markets respond to that. So it's something to bear in mind as you're assessing things or assessing your financial plan as you move forward. Thank you.